Hello, Talking Fight fans around the world. Welcome to another episode of Neil the Deal with Neil the Deal himself. Thanks for joining us. And tonight we've got a very special episode lined up, super special episode, something we've never really, we've touched on, but we've never gotten to in any great depth in terms of its historical context. And Neil, you have found out some great information for us. Let's hear it.
Hey, good evening, Graham. Nice to see you again. Hope you had a nice weekend.
I did. Thank you.
Guys, Neil the Deal show fans, Talking Fight fans, thanks for coming out. Hope you guys had a nice weekend. Stayed safe and stay warm, you know. So, yeah, last week we had an interesting bunch of episodes in regards to fighters in the Americas, and we are going to continue with that later this week. But we had a bit of a discussion on Friday in regards to guys who have had many numbers of fights and many numbers of rounds. So over the weekend, it kind of kept bugging me a bit. You know what I mean, Graham? Like, well, really, who is the guy who's got the most fight? Who is the guy who's actually done the most rounds? Like, really? So I did a whole bunch of research and figured out that this is the individual, Graham. And we're going to talk, guys, thanks again for the likes, the shares, all the great stuff you've been doing, the subscriptions, keep them coming. But you're going to love this. This one is really neat. So, and again, I had no clue. So this is all new to me as well. So, guys, check this out. You're going to love it. All right, we're going to talk about an English fighter. All right, his name was Len Wickwar. Len Wickwar. All right. So apparently, Mr. Wickwar is the holder of the most fights to date and most rounds to date. So if you get your calculators out, Graham, this will be interesting because I do have one. I was going to try to figure this out and I didn't, but it'll be interesting. So we're going to talk about him, guys. So his name is Leonard Arthur Wickwar. That's Leonard Arthur Wickwar. He went by Len Wickwar. He was born March 21st. Apparently, it was either March 11th or March 21st. So there's a conflicting thing there, is his actual birth date. So we're going to call it March 21st, 1911 in Leicester, Graham, was it, or Leicester?
Leicester. Yeah, Leicester.
Leicester. Okay, Leicester, the United Kingdom, which would be considered England, correct, Graham? Like United Kingdom is the whole country, I guess, but England, right?
Leicester's in England, yeah.
Leicester's in England, yeah, because he was an English fighter. So he died, unfortunately. I mean, we all do. He died June 1st, 1980, which made him 69 years old at that time. So he was a lightweight, all right? He was a lightweight, and his career spanned from 1928 until 1947. So that would be 19 years, guys, all right? Interesting enough, he was discovered by a guy named George Biddles, who was also managed a guy from a place in England, I guess. Graham, you probably know Nottinghamshire?
Nottinghamshire.
Nottinghamshire, yeah. So apparently he was, as a young child, I guess that's close to Leicester, right? Leicester. Or Leicester. And this George Biddles guy eventually was managing a featherweight at the time. His name was Tish Marsden, and he was a world champion guy. This Tish Marsden, and Mr. Biddles saw him just kind of training in a gym. Apparently they were training in some sort of an attic or something in some like, it wasn't really a gym. It was just they built something, I guess, for people to go up to the upstairs of like a store, some sort of an old store or something. And apparently this Tish Marsden was up there training with this young kid. And the manager guy said, hey, this kid's pretty good. So that was Len Wickwar, was the kid. So the crazy part about, I'm going to mention this right now. We could mention it later, but I think now is, I mentioned that he died on June 1st, 1980. Well, Tish Marsden, who was his buddy, they both died on the same day, June 1st, 1980. So that's kind of a weird thing to think that your best buddy that you grew up with, and he was a little older, Tish Marsden, but they both died on the exact same day. That's freaking weird. So Jake Graham, he never got a title shot. He was never a title holder. He was close. He was a contender back in the day, but his fight record is just undisputable. So I don't know where these are, but Graham always knows all this great stuff. So his biggest fight was July 1939 at a place called the Welford Road Stadium. Welford? I guess that's a big place in England, Welford.
It's a new one.
The new one, yeah.
Gotta admit, I don't know that one.
It could have been in Nottinghamshire, right? And it's just called it's Welford Road, so it's obviously like it was just something, right, on Welford Road. I guess it's like a place where they had the matches back in those days. So, and he fought a guy at the time who was the British champion, and his name was Eric Boone. So we're gonna just say his notable fights. You guys want to check out Mr. Wickwar? That is a notable fight. I did see that today. I watched that on YouTube, and it was interesting, really cool stuff. So he ended up getting knocked out in the 9th. So Wickwar did not win the British title that time, but you know he gave it his best shot. So that was probably his biggest accomplishment, is getting at least to a British title fight, right? All right, so we're gonna go over these pro totals. Graham, are you ready, guys? Check this out. Okay, this I was like, you got to be kidding me. So, all right, I'm gonna say this, and you're probably gonna laugh. Total pro fights, 473. 473 fights. What? All right, so they equated it out to rounds. So this will answer our question about the rounds thing and what was going on last week and stuff. So he had 473 fights. All right, so this is where the math comes in. He did 4,020 rounds. 4,020 rounds? Wow. Unbelievable stuff, guys. So out of those 473 fights, he actually won 342 fights. He had 93 KOs. All right. That would give him a knockout percentage of 27%, which isn't the greatest, but it's a little over a quarter of the fights. He did lose 86 fights out of the 473. He had 43 draws, and he had 2 no contests. All right. So I don't know. I was going to try to figure this out, Graham. It was, okay, so if he had 342 fights divided by 4,020 rounds, the average length of, well, actually 473. So the average length, I guess, would be almost 10 rounds a fight. Almost, like maybe the average would be like 8.5 or something, right? All totaled. 4,000 rounds, 473 fights. So it's, it's around that number. So the stuff that he was doing was crazy. So these are some of the things. This is how he got to these astronomical numbers. Like, I'm like thinking, how do you do that? So his pro career was in, okay, think about it, Graham. 19 years, he did 473 fights. So let's divide 473 by 19. You're probably going to get 20, makes it, say 20 and 20, that'd be 400. So 24 or something. So let's just say he averaged 24 fights a year for 19 years straight, which would mean that would be 2 fights a month every year, at least, for 19 years straight. What? That's insane. So I tried to figure it out, because I'm thinking 19 years, how the heck did he do that? So then I find out, so he turned pro at 17, right? So he started out really young, and he was a flyweight when he started out, and then he moved up to lightweight. But he would fight in his early days 3 fights a night, Graham.
Wow.
In the same night, he would fight 3 different opponents. This is how he got these numbers, like these crazy numbers of total fights. Like, I mean, if you get 100 fights under your belt, like some of these guys, like Mr. Monzon and Mr. Azar Charles has over 100 fights. There's all the kind of guys that have 100, but 400. That's a little different, you know what I mean? Like, that's just ridiculously crazy stuff. So in 1934, Graham, Mr. Wickwar actually had 58 fights in 1 year. 58 fights in 1 year. So that's, if he did four a month, that would be 48. So he had another 10. So he did 5 a month. So 5 fights a month in a whole year. So it's like he fought every week. Like, literally. So I don't know. That's what he did. So this is how he got those numbers. And he fought right up to 1939. Then the war came, Graham. And he wasn't part of the war, but he was unable to fight professionally, because they obviously stopped the war. The war stopped the boxing community. You know what I mean? Because a lot of the boxers ended up in the war. So they weren't having any professional fights between 39 and 45. And then he started up back in 46 when they brought everything back and everything started getting somewhat back to normal, I guess. And he had his last fight in 1947, right? Which was a loss. So he did all that. He retired. Apparently, he took a job, just a regular job. He got an engineering degree, became an engineer, and he worked in a packing company as a packing guy and a labor guy. But he also had the engineering behind him. So he just basically retired and got a regular job, and that was that, right? So that's the guy's basic career in a nutshell. You know, it's when you really think about something like that, it really takes me back. What do you like 470 fights, Graham, is pretty crazy stuff, right?
Incredible.
It really is. It really is. And, you know, he was just a young kid, I guess, out of England. And, you know, he started fighting young and he just kept going. And like I said, with that number of fights, like 39, he had that'd be a fight a week professionally. So that would be like whatever Floyd Mayweather fighting every week, like for years. Can you imagine? You'd make a lot of money at that rate. You know what I mean? You know,
Yeah,
100 million a week or something.
I'm curious to know if he did make any money. Like, were these fights paying relatively well, or back then? I mean, were they paying like a couple of shillings a fight?
Absolutely, man. They were paying like the equivalent of probably, from what the research I've done, where the guys were fighting even in the 30s and the 40s, which were getting $15 a fight. This is he's probably getting $10, $15 a fight type of stuff. You know what I mean? And back then, $10 or $15, as we all know, is big money. Like my grandfather was a stonemason and he built the Parliament buildings and was getting paid 25 cents an hour. And he didn't have any machinery. So try that. You build the Parliament buildings by hand, no machines, for 25 cents an hour. It's just, you think about that. Just wow. Like in a whole week, I think, you know, he'd work an 8-hour day. He's told me he'd get like $2 a day. And then every week, that was his salary, $10 a week, and worked harder than any human being known to man. Like, you do not want to be a stonemason, intricate stone cutter and a stonemason for a living, because you'll be broken. So, like, literally, it's the craziest job. I tried it for a couple of years, and that was the end of me. Like, I was like, this is just crazy hard. So, anyways, you guys want to go out, check out Len Wickwar, guy with probably most fights for sure. Maybe there's got to be wins too. And rounds, 4,020 rounds. Check this guy out. Look at him, guys, and comment. Let us know what you think about that. You know what I'm saying? So stay safe, guys. Be good. Thanks for coming out. Really appreciate everything. And we're going to get back to the Americas starting tomorrow. Okay. So tune in, and we'll talk a little bit more about the fighters around Americas. And we'll see you then. So thanks for coming, guys. I really appreciate it. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you tomorrow night.
Thanks a lot, Neil. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, Graham. Have yourself a good evening, guys. Go Leafs, go.
You as well. See you tomorrow.
Exactly. Okay.